Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from our UPSC perspective. Now today's news, dated 27th February 2021, has been discussed by me and Mangal sir. Now the topic to be discussed has been displayed on the screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion from our UPSC prelims and mains perspective. Now the first news to be discussed appears on page number 1 and also on page number 9. The news says, Assembly polls to kick off on March 27. So the Election Commission has announced Legislative Assembly elections for the state of Assam, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal and the Union Territory of Puducherry, as Puducherry has a Legislative Assembly as per the 14th Amendment of Indian Constitution, which provided for Article 239A to the Indian Constitution. Now this extract which I have taken talks about Model Code of Conduct. So this application highlights that with this announcement, that is announcement of the election to these legislative assemblies of these different states, the provisions of the Model Code of Conduct for the guidance of political parties and candidates have come into force with immediate effect. So the point to be understood is that Model Code of Conduct comes into immediate effect on the announcement of elections. So this aspect becomes very important from your prelims point of view and says that the Model Code of Conduct will be in force till the completion of the general elections in the above states. So this news becomes important primarily from the perspective of conducting of elections in states, as these aspects has also been provided in the Constitution of India. Now here I would like you to go through Article 172 very carefully. It mentions about duration of state legislature. So it highlights that every legislative assembly of every state, unless sooner dissolved, shall continue for 5 years from the date appointed for its first meeting and no longer. And it further says that the expiration of the said period of 5 years shall operate as a dissolution of the assembly. So 5 years has been constitutionally mandated as the life of a democratically elected government to state legislative assembly. Now it further highlights that this period of 5 years in a state can be extended, and this extension can only be granted by the Parliament by law for a period not exceeding 1 year at a time, and only while a proclamation of emergency is in operation in the said state. Now this provision further mentions about Legislative Council as well. It says that the Legislative Council of a state shall not be subject to dissolution, but as nearly as possible, 1/3 of the members shall retire as soon as may be on the expiration of every second year. So 1/3 of the members of Legislative Council shall retire every second year. And this will be done in accordance with the provisions made in behalf by Parliament by law. So here Article 172 becomes important, and there is also a correlation between Article 172 and Article 324. Let's see how. So Article 324 mentions about superintendent's direction and control of elections to be vested in Election Commission. So Election Commission is a constitutionally mandated body to conduct elections in India. So Article 324 highlights that the superintendent's direction and control of the preparation of electoral rolls and the conduct of all elections to that of Parliament and to the legislature of every state and elections to the offices of President and Vice President held under this Constitution shall be vested in a commission referred as the Election Commission. So the Election Commission shall conduct election for Parliament, state legislative assemblies, the office of the President and also the office of the Vice President. So we understand that after the dissolution of 5 years, the Election Commission under Article 324 is mandated to conduct election for the state legislative assembly. That's why there is a correlation between Article 172 and Article 324 of the Indian Constitution. Moving further, Article 173 also becomes important, especially from the perspective of the fact that it provides for qualification for membership of the state legislature. Now it highlights that a person shall not be qualified to be chosen to fill a seat in the legislature of a state unless first he is a citizen of India and makes and subscribes before some person authorized in that behalf by the Election Commission an oath or affirmation according to the form set out for the purpose in third schedule. So there are two important things highlighted here. The person concerned must be citizen of India, and secondly, it mentions about oath or affirmation as provided under third schedule of the Indian Constitution. Next, the provision highlights about the qualifying age. Here it says that in case of seat in legislative assembly not less than 25 years. So for state legislative assembly, the person concerned shall not be less than 25 years of age. And in the case of a legislative council, shall not be less than 30 years of age. So these are some of the important facts to be noted from your prelims point of view. And the third aspect is that the person concerned must possess such other qualifications as may be prescribed in that behalf by or under any law made by Parliament. And here the Parliament has prescribed certain qualification under Representation of People Act of 1951. So the Representation of People Act of 1951 under Section 5 provides for qualification of membership of a legislative assembly. It says that a person shall not be qualified to be chosen to fill a seat in the legislative assembly of a state unless a. In the case of a seat reserved for scheduled caste or for scheduled tribes of that state, he is a member of any of those caste or any of those tribes and is also an elector for any assembly constituency in that state. B. In case of a seat reserved for an autonomous district of Assam, he is a member of a scheduled tribe or any autonomous district and is also an elector for the assembly constituency in which such seat or any other seat is reserved for that particular district. And C. In case of any other state, he is an elector for any assembly constituency in that state. So these are the qualifications provided under Section 5 of Representation of People Act 1951 for qualifications for membership of a legislative assembly. Now, based on these understanding of important constitutional provisions, let's go through some of the questions asked by UPSC in the previous years in the prelims examination. Now, very recently in the prelims of 2020, this particular question was asked by UPSC. The question was, consider the following statements. First, according to the Constitution of India, a person who is eligible to vote can be made a minister in a state for 6 months even if he or she is not a member of legislature of that state. So here we have seen that a person who is not less than 25 years of age shall not be qualified to be chosen to fill a seat in legislature of a state. However, this aspect must be collaborated with respect to eligibility to vote. And this eligibility to vote has been provided under Article 326 of the Indian Constitution. Now, Article 326 says that elections to the House of the People and to the Legislative Assembly of a state shall be on the basis of adult suffrage. That is to say, every person who is a citizen of India and who is not less than 18 years of age on such date as may be fixed in that behalf by or under any law made by the appropriate legislature. So eligibility to vote under Article 326 has been provided as not less than 18 years of age. So here when we compare Article 326 with that of Article 173, we see that a person who is eligible to vote cannot be made a minister in the state, since a person of more than 18 years, say a person of 20 years, cannot be made a minister in a state legislative assembly. Hence, the first option becomes incorrect. Second, according to Representation of People Act 1951, a person convicted of a criminal offence and sentenced to imprisonment for 5 years is permanently disqualified from contesting an election even after his release from the prison. No, this statement is also incorrect as the disqualification is for 6 years. Now, these aspects has been discussed in detail in a special video on UPSC Prelims 2020 analysis and discussion on the paper of Polity and Governance asked in the prelims of 2020. So, for a detailed understanding of all the questions asked by UPSC in Polity and Governance and also in other sections, you can go through these special videos made on specific subjects like history, polity and governance, economy, etc. So here the question was which of the statements given above are correct. So here the correct answer becomes D, that is neither 1 nor 2. Now coming to this question asked by UPSC in 2017. The question was right to vote and to be elected in India is a. Options were A, fundamental right, B, natural right, C, constitutional right and D, legal right. Now we have seen that the aspect of adult suffrage has been provided under Article 326. Hence we can say that the correct answer here is C, that is constitutional right. Now let's take up these two questions also asked by UPSC in the year 2017. The question was, For election to the Lok Sabha, a nomination paper can be filed by. Options were anyone residing in India. No, this is incorrect. Second, a resident of the constituency from which the election is to be contested. Not necessarily. C. Any citizen of India whose name appears in the electoral roll of a constituency. Yes, this is correct. And D. Any citizen of India. Again, any citizen of India who is below 25 years of age cannot file nomination for Lok Sabha. So here the correct answer becomes C. Now moving on to another question asked again in the year 2017 on the Election Commission. The question was, consider the following statements. First, the Election Commission of India is a 5-member body. No, this is incorrect as Election Commission so far is a 3-member body. Second, Union Ministry of Home Affairs decides the election schedule for the conduct of both general elections and by-elections. No, this is again incorrect as it is the Election Commission of India which decides the schedule for the conduct of both general elections and by-elections. And third, Election Commission resolves the disputes relating to split mergers of recognized political parties. Yes, this is correct as per the Representation of People's Act of 1951 and also as per the election symbols, reservation and allotment order. So here the question was, which of the statements given above are correct? So the correct answer becomes D, that is 3 only. Now based on this question asked by UPSC in 2017, these aspects becomes important for you to remember for your upcoming examination as well. It highlights that originally the Election Commission had only one Chief Election Commissioner. However, as of now, it currently consists of a Chief Election Commissioner and 2 Election Commissioners. So for the first time, 2 additional commissioners were appointed on 16th October 1989, but again they had a very short tenure till 1st January 1990. But later, on 1st October 1993, 2 additional election commissioners were appointed again, and the concept of multi-member commission has been in operation since then with the decision-making power by a majority vote. Now regarding the registration of political parties, this has been provided under section 29A of Representation of People Act, and further it is up to the Election Commission to determine whether a political party is a national party or a state party. So this is provided under the Election Symbols, Reservation and Allotment Order of 1968. So these are some of the important aspects which you must remember from your prelims point of view. Now in the starting of the discussion, we also mentioned about Model Code of Conduct. So let's go through some of the important aspect of Model Code of Conduct which is also covered in the means compass of Polity and Governance section. So the Model Code of Conduct is basically a guidance or a guideline from the Election Commission to the political parties. So it says that MCC is a set of norms which has been evolved with the consensus of political parties who have consented to abide by these principles which has been established in the code, and this principle also binds them to respect and observe the Model Code of Conduct in letter and spirit. So with consensus, the political parties abide and respect the principles laid down in the Model Code of Conduct. So in general it says that the Model Code of Conduct lays down how political parties contesting candidates and parties in power should conduct themselves during the process of election, that is on their general conduct during electioneering, holding meetings and processions, poll day activities and also functioning of the party which is in power. Now another very important question pertaining to MCC is that, is the Model Code of Conduct legally enforceable? The simple answer is no. So it says that the Model Code of Conduct does not have a statutory backing and hence cannot be enforced legally, and as said that it is only a guidelines from the Election Commission based on the consensus of different political parties. So it is a mere set of guidelines which is agreed by all parties as a model to be obeyed during the conduct of elections. But the question is that some provisions of the Model Code of Conduct can still be enforced by the Election Commission. And this can be done by invoking certain corresponding provisions in other laws such as the Indian Penal Code, Criminal Procedure Code and even the Representation of People Act 1951 in order to conduct the election. Now remember, this aspect becomes important because of Article 324. Because Article 324 mentions about 3 important terms pertaining to the conduct of election by Election Commission. Number 1, superintendence of elections. Number 2, direction provided by Election Commission to conduct elections, and number 3, control of not only the conduct of election but also with respect to preparation of electoral rolls and also conduct of elections to these different offices, that is for Parliament, State Legislative Assembly, for the office of President and Vice President. Now, this topic always emanates as to why Model Code of Conduct is not enforced, or why not the government passes a law so that Model Code of Conduct can be legally enforced. So, here you must understand that even the Election Commission of India and even former Chief Election Commissioners are against making MCC a law or converting these MCC guidelines into a statute, because they say that it will delay the cases pertaining to elections, resulting in delay in the conduct of elections. Now, this is because this code is in a form of a guideline. An election commission has all the power to look into any concerns highlighted by any opposition parties or any other candidate or person in order to solve or settle the dispute. But if these guidelines are converted into law, then the aspect of judicial review will come into picture, and that may delay the entire process of conduct of election. So it highlights that if cases are filed with respect to ongoing elections, then it will delay the entire process, as litigants will resort to appeals in High Court or Supreme Court, and then the entire matter of election might become sub judice. Further, former election commissioner S.Y. Qureshi also argued against legalizing Model Code of Conduct, and here he also emphasized on strengthening the role and functions of election commission through further electoral reforms. So again, these aspect becomes important if a question is asked either in your prelims or means examination regarding Model Code of Conduct, and also whether Model Code of Conduct should be made legally enforceable or not. Now, another aspect which needs to be understood is about the applicability of Model Code of Conduct. Now, in the case of Union of India versus Harbans Singh Jalal and others, the Supreme Court of India ruled that the Model Code of Conduct would come into force the moment Election Commission issues the press release, which precedes the notification by about 2 weeks. So there are two aspects here. One is announcement of election, which happened yesterday for these 5 states by the Chief Election Commissioner, and the other is notification in official gazette by the Election Commission for the conduct of these elections. So the Model Code of Conduct comes into effect effectively from the announcement of election, and not from the date of notification by Election Commission to conduct elections. It further highlights that this ruling ended the controversy related to the dates of enforcement of the Model Code of Conduct. So, the Model Code of Conduct remains in force from the date of announcement of elections till the completion of elections. And the Model Code of Conduct is applicable for the election to Lok Sabha, Vidhan Sabha, that is State Legislative Assembly, and also during by-elections. Now, the Model Code of Conduct provides for the guidelines for political parties and candidates. And there are 8 important aspects or subjects on which the Model Code of Conduct provides the guidelines. These are general conduct, meetings, procession, polling day, polling booth, observers, party in power, and also for guidelines on election manifestos. So again, remember these aspects on which the Model Code of Conduct provide guidelines for political parties and candidates to conduct elections in India. Now, after understanding the Model Code of Conduct, the other aspect of the news appearing on page number 9, it says that no postal ballots for NRIs this time as per Election Commission of India. Now, in our earlier DNS, we have discussed that the Election Commission of India had written an official letter to the Ministry of Law and Justice seeking allowance for NRIs to vote in elections in India through postal ballot. However, so far the Ministry of Law and Justice has not agreed to this proposal of Election Commission. Now, this aspect has been discussed in detail by Mangal sir in the DNS dated 20th December 2020. The news title was, "Are NRIs likely to get postal voting rights soon?" So, to have a crystal understanding about this topic, please go through the DNS dated 20th December 2020 to understand about this aspect of NRIs likely to get postal voting rights soon. Now, here it's important to note that NRIs can come in India and vote accordingly. However, voting through postal ballot so far has not been allowed to them. Thus, this topic becomes very important both from our prelims and mains point of view. In the prelims, this topic gets covered under Indian polity and governance, and in the mains, it gets covered under GS paper 2, especially with respect to important features of the Indian Constitution, salient features of Representation of People Act 1951, and appointment to various constitutional posts, powers and functions and responsibilities, especially with that of Election Commission of India. So with this, let's move to the next news discussion.
This article on page number 6 talks about India-US relations under the new President of United States of America. And in this line, this article highlights that the bonhomie that India and US relationship witnessed during the Trump's presidency is not going to be the same under the new president Joe Biden. Further, the article highlights that although the main outlines of the relationship are going to remain the same, but there are issues where a diversion from Trump's approach towards India will be witnessed under the new president. So, in this regard, let us look at how India US relationship has evolved during the Trump era and how it is going to change under the new president. And what are going to be the new contours of India US relationship under the new president Joe Biden. And the points that we discuss here can be important for us from General Studies Paper 2 point of view in the topic International Relations. Now, we have already learned that under Trump's administration, there were some landmark decisions that were taken by the United States of America. And we note that under the Trump's era, US had withdrawn from the Paris Climate Deal, it had withdrawn from the World Health Organization, and also it had withdrawn from the Human Rights Council of United Nations. And also America had greatly altered its immigration policies. However, these decisions that were taken by Donald Trump have already been reversed under the new president Joe Biden. In this regard, let us look at what are the points on which there will be collaboration between India and the United States of America under the new president Joe Biden. So the article highlights that on majority of the issues including the COVID-19, climate change, healthcare, immigration, and restoring America's global standing, India and US are already engaging with each other and are on the same page. Now, the policy issues that we are going to discuss here have continuously been in news for past 1 or 2 years and have been discussed in detail in various DNS videos. However, we'll be looking at these issues from a very cursory point of view so that we have an understanding of the overall issues that exist between India and the United States of America, especially in the context of election of new president in the United States of America. So in this regard, one of the areas of collaboration between India and the US under the new president is strategic convergence. And we all know that the new president Joe Biden has been giving push to the policies that were outlined during the Trump regime as far as the strategic convergence between India and US is concerned. And in this line, US under Joe Biden will be collaborating with India on the Trump era policies of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue and the Indo-Pacific policy. You all might be knowing that the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue is aimed at China and it aims at collaborating with the countries that are there in the Indo-Pacific region. And the members of Quadrilateral Security Dialogue include India, Japan, US and Australia. And the interest of the new US administration in these Trump-era policies of the Quad and the Indo-Pacific policy were seen in the recent call that happened between Joe Biden and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Also, there were two important calls that took place between the US Secretary of the State and India's External Affairs Ministers. And also a virtual quadrilateral ministerial meeting happened between the foreign ministers of Japan, Australia, India and the US's Secretary of the State. So these events highlight that the strategic convergence that started between India and the US under the Trump administration is likely to continue under the Joe Biden's administration also. Further, we all know that the United States of America had withdrawn from the Paris Climate Deal related to global warming. However, the Joe Biden administration has already indicated that it will soon be joining the Paris Climate Deal. And in this regard, Joe Biden's climate change envoy John Kerry has praised India's efforts on renewable energy and global carbon dioxide emissions. Further, an overarching memorandum of understanding will be signed between India and the US as far as the health cooperation is concerned. And this will be aimed at the COVID-19 vaccines and the various global health issues that are happening presently. Then we note that US under the Trump administration had imposed certain restrictions on the immigration. However, the new president has already lifted these restrictions and has also lifted the caps on a number of visas and the green cards. And this is especially very important for India because a lot of Indians are working in the United States of America and have been enjoying the fruits of the liberal US immigration policy from last 2 to 3 decades. Now, besides looking at the convergence between India and US, let us look at the divergence that is likely to take place under the new president of the United States of America from the approach that US followed towards India. Now, we note that during the Ladakh or the Galwan Valley standoff with China along the line of actual control, the United States of America under the Donald Trump administration had provided moral and material support to India in the form of greater military cooperation and also intelligence sharing. Further, India had held the MALABAR naval exercise and also participated in various meetings of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, and they were all aimed at countering the rise of China. Further, as far as the US policy towards China is concerned, Donald Trump did not mince his words in taking on China in the form of trade war, and also he accused China of being responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic. However, Joe Biden's position on China has been a very calculated one, and he has been calculated in his opposition of China, which is clearly visible from his statements. And he sees China as a competitor in areas such as defense, trade and technology rather than seeing China as an adversary of United States of America. And in this regard, he has also shown the need for cooperation between the US and China on certain global issues like the climate change, etc., where it is in the United States of America's interest to do so. So this highlights that although the new president of United States of America is seeing China as a competitor in different areas, it is also seeking cooperation in certain other areas. Further, US has been taking certain decisions which are likely to hit the Indian pharmaceutical industry. And we note that India is one of the major producers of pharmaceuticals in the world. And in this regard, the prospects of Indian pharmaceutical industries can be badly hit if US takes any decision adverse to the interests of India. Further, India, Japan and Australia, which are also the members of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, are already working on a trilateral supply chain resilience initiative to counter the dependence on Chinese goods, and you should note that United States of America is not a part of this. So under Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, under which India, Japan, Australia and US are opposing China, on this platform, that is the Supply Chain Resilience Initiative, only India, Japan and Australia are participating and US is not a part of it. And this Supply Chain Resilience Initiative aims at countering the dependence of these countries on the Chinese goods. So this can be clearly seen as a divergence from the approach that was followed by the Donald Trump administration under the new president of United States of America. Then there is another contentious issue, and that is related to the human rights. So the new president of United States of America has vowed to put human rights at the center of the foreign policy. And this is likely to have great implications for India-US relations. And in the recent call that happened between Joe Biden and Indian Prime Minister, he outlined the US commitment to put human rights at the center of the foreign policy. However, the issue here is that the new administration or the new US administration has started to comment upon the human rights issues in India, and especially with regards to the freedom of speech and the way in which India is handling the farmer protests and the internet blockade in Jammu and Kashmir. Further, during the Trump era, India had shut down the operations of various international non-governmental organizations like the Amnesty International, Greenpeace and the Compassion International. So it is being said that the new President Joe Biden is not going to ignore the government's action to shut down these international agencies in the same way as the previous administration did under Donald Trump. Further, as far as the human rights issue in South Asia is concerned, the US will want India to partner in ensuring the human rights in South Asia, particularly given its current term in the UN Security Council. Now we note that India has been elected as a non-permanent member in the UN Security Council. And in this regard, US will like to partner with India for ensuring human rights in South Asia. And both the countries have shown concerns over the military coup that has happened in Myanmar. However, the views that have been expressed by both India and the US are different here. Because the United States of America has clearly said that the military takeover of the administration should be stopped and there should be democratic government that should govern Myanmar. However, India had said that there should be law and order and democracy should be given primacy. That is, India has not clearly called out the military coup that has happened in Myanmar. Now, although this view of India is governed by India's neighborhood relationship, however, this is a clear divergence in terms of views of India and the US regarding human rights issue in the South Asia. Another important issue related to human rights is the issue of Sri Lanka. And very soon a resolution can be passed by the Human Rights Council against Sri Lanka for its military excesses in the 2009 war against LTTE. Now, in this regard, it is being speculated that India is going to support Sri Lanka, keeping in mind its own interest with the neighboring country. However, the US is going to clearly support the resolution by the UNHRC against Sri Lanka. Further, we note that China has been supporting Sri Lanka on the issue of LTTE and calling it an internal issue. So this clearly shows the divergent approach that India is taking as far as the Sri Lanka issue is concerned. And in this regard, it is aligning with the view of China on Sri Lanka, keeping in mind its own interests rather than aligning with the view of United States of America on Sri Lanka and specifically related to the human rights issue in Sri Lanka. And then there is concern regarding the growing India Russia relationship. Now, in this regard, you might have learned in the previous DNS videos and the newspaper articles that India is importing S-400 missile defense system from Russia. Now, due to this importing of S-400 missile defense system, India can face sanctions from the United States of America under the CAATSA law of the United States of America. And this law aims at countering America's adversaries through sanctions. And in this regard, America has clearly highlighted that its adversaries include Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Further, we all know that all the countries are looking for a solution in the Afghanistan. And in this regard, regarding the peace process that is going on in Afghanistan, US has started to collaborate with Taliban on this issue. However, India has taken an independent course from the US and it is standing firmly with the Ashraf Ghani government and is resolutely refusing to engage with Taliban, which India considers as a terrorist organization. So in this regard, it is being said that this is pragmatic on part of India, but it also means that the United States of America will continue to see India as not a part of the problem and also not a part of the solution. And it is likely to seek more support from Pakistan to facilitate its exit from the Afghanistan. And you might all be knowing that the United States of America has been in war in Afghanistan after the 9/11 attack. So clearly in this discussion, we have seen the areas and the issues of convergence and divergence that is going to take place from the Trump era foreign policy of US towards India under the new president Joe Biden. With this, let's take up the next news article.
Now, the next news to be discussed appears as an article on page number 6. It says, Imparting Direction to Science in India. While it is a mixed bag as far as the metrics on scientific research are concerned, the draft policy seeks a new path. Now, this article highlights about the draft Science and Technology and Innovation Policy of 2020, which is the fifth national policy on science and technology. So this article highlights about certain features and also challenges with respect to the draft National Science and Technology and Innovation Policy of 2020. Now this article starts by mentioning about the National Science Day, which is celebrated every year on 28th February. And we celebrate National Science Day on 28th February to mark the discovery of Raman effect by Indian physicist Sir C.V. Raman. So the article highlights that there is not only a need to celebrate the achievements and advancements made in the field of science and technology in India, but also ponder upon or address challenges, especially with respect to the research and innovation in the field of science and technology. Now, regarding addressing challenges in research and technology, especially in the field of science and technology, the article highlights that even though there are a number of publications with respect to science and technology, yet most of these publications are not relevant. So the relevancy and usefulness of these publications in the field of science and technology is being questioned. And this is because most of these publications are not cited in important journals and articles throughout the world. And it is here where India performs poorly, especially in the field of science and technology. So an extract of the article says that from the report published by National Science Foundation of the United States in December 2019, in the top 1% of the most cited publications from 2016, India's index score was of mere 0.7, which is lower than that of United States, China and the European Union. Now regarding this score, it says that an index score of 1 or more is considered good. And hence the article makes an inference that citation of publication from India should improve. Now it is here where the usefulness of national science technology policy becomes important. Now so far, India has had 4 national science policy. The first was in 1958 regarding scientific policy resolution. The second was in 1983 regarding technology policy statement. The third was in 2003 with respect to the science and technology policy. And the fourth in 2013. And this was the first policy which included innovation. So it is here where understanding the draft National Science, Technology and Innovation Policy of 2020 becomes important, as it gives into an insight as to what sort of a strategy the government aims to implement, not only in order to boost research and development in the field of science and technology, but also to improve citations across the world. Now regarding India's first science and technology policy, it was adopted in 1958 and it aimed to develop the scientific enterprise and lay foundation for scientific temper. And this policy led to the establishment of many research institutes and national laboratories in India. Now, regarding the second science and technology policy of 1983, the emphasis was on technological self-reliance and use of technology for benefit of all sections of the society was also emphasized. Further, it also aimed to strengthen research in the fields such as electronics and biotechnology. Now, regarding the 2003 policy, now this was the first science policy which came after the economic liberalization of 1991. And this overall aimed to increase investment in the field of research and development. Now, as per this policy, the Scientific Engineering Research Board was established to promote research in India. And in 2013, the aspect of innovation was included in India's science and technology policy, and the focus for India was to become one of the top 5 global scientific leaders. Now, the aim of the draft Science, Technology and Innovation Policy of 2020 is twofold. Number one, to increase number of researchers, thereby publications in the field of science and technology. And second, to attract more private investments in the field of research and innovation in science and technology. So, based on this understanding, let us go through the important features of this policy. First, it mentions about an open science framework to create one nation, one subscription. Now, this will give all individuals and institutions in India access to all top journals through a central subscription. And overall, it will help in improving access to publishable knowledge. Second, it will lead to the establishment of National STI Observatory, which will act as a central repository for all kinds of data related to and generated from the STI ecosystem, that is Science and Technology Innovation Ecosystem. It further says that open science framework will be built to provide access to scientific data information, knowledge and resource to everyone in the country and all who are engaging with Indian STI ecosystem on an equal partnership basis. Further, it also highlights that all data used in and generated from publicly funded research will be available to everyone. The third aspect highlighted is regarding the strategy to improve funding for and participation in research. Now, it highlights that India's gross domestic expenditure on R&D is currently 0.6% of GDP, and this is comparatively quite low as compared to investments made by US, China, Israel or any other country. So it is here where the government aims to encourage private sector funding in the fields of research, especially in the field of science and technology. Now it mentions about inclusion of underrepresented groups of people in research, especially women as well as LGBT community. And it also mentions about gender equity in the field of research. It says that equal opportunity in academics will be provided to women along with candidates from rural and remote areas, marginalized communities, differently abled groups, irrespective of their caste, creed, religion, race, etc. The policy further aims to create an accountable research ecosystem by promoting translational as well as foundational research in India in alignment with global standards. Further, the policy talks about collaboration between grassroots innovators and scientists, and this will be facilitated through joint research projects, fellowship, and scholarships. Now, this will give recognition to all those grassroots researchers whose technology makes day to day life easy. It further mentions about support for indigenous knowledge system by attainment of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and national priorities. It further mentions about reaching out to Indian scientific diaspora for collaboration and also aims to create an engagement portal exclusively to bring together Indian scientists and technocrats from all over the world to engage with Indian researchers. Further, through this policy, India also aims to encourage science diplomacy, and an example of science diplomacy as of now can be said to be offering COVID-19 vaccines to many developing countries of the world. Further, the policy aims to establish a strategic technology development fund which will be created to incentivize the private sector and higher educational institutes in India. Further, the policy also talks about support for indigenous knowledge system in India and also mentions about strategies to improve science, technology and innovation education, making it inclusive at all levels. So these are some of the important features with respect to the draft National Science, Technology and Innovation Policy of 2020. Now, there are certain challenges which the article highlights. These challenges are number one, inclusivity. That is, it is yet to be determined as to how the government will ensure overall inclusivity of all sections of the society. Second is regarding achieving the SDG goals, particularly with respect to SDG 4, as it mentions about education. Now, the next challenge is that the article says that only R&D investment alone will not produce results. So the government must also strategize in order to make publications more useful so that these publications can be cited in top journals of the world. Thus, these are certain challenges which the article has highlighted with respect to the draft National Science and Technology and Innovation Policy of 2020. Now, this topic becomes important both from the prelims and from the mains point of view. In the prelims, this topic gets covered under social development, especially with respect to social sector initiatives. And in the mains, gets covered under GS paper 2, especially with respect to education, and GS paper 3 regarding developments in the field of science and technology. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 14. The news highlights current inflation target band apt for next 5 years, says RBI report. Trend inflation has dropped from above 9% to 3.8 to 4.3%. Now, this report which this news talks about is the report on currency and finance for the year 2020-21 released by the Reserve Bank of India. Now, here what you need to understand is that this particular report recommended continuation of inflation targeting framework in India for the next 5 years. Now, ideally, RBI has agreed to keep inflation at 4%. However, a plus minus 2% of inflation targeting is allowed. So, inflation can range from 2% to that of 6%. And this is the inflation targeting framework as agreed between the center and the RBI. And to insert this idea of inflation targeting framework, RBI Act was amended in 2016 to provide for this flexible inflation targeting. So according to this amendment, central government must determine inflation targets in terms of consumer price index once in every 5 years. And presently, as per the monetary policy agreement signed between the central government and Reserve Bank of India, it provides that the Monetary Policy Committee should maintain an ideal rate of inflation of 4%, which could increase or decrease by 2%. That is, the rate of inflation ideally should be 4%, but could also decrease to 2% and also increase to 6%. And this is what this particular report highlights. As this report on currency and finance for the year 2020-21 by RBI recommends continuation of inflation targeting framework. Now, this topic of inflation targeting framework was discussed in previous DNS. So here let us understand about inflation targeting, the benefits of inflation targeting, and also challenges associated with inflation targeting. Now, the RBI plays a multi-dimensional role in the Indian economy. It regulates the money supply in the economy. It influences the rate of interest on borrowing as well as lending of money. It controls the rate of inflation in the economy. It manages the external sector in the economy, including the exchange rate. It supervises and regulates the banking sector, as well as it ensures financial stability. Now, one of the most critical functions of RBI is to target inflation in the economy, as provided under the Monetary Policy Framework Agreement signed between the RBI as well as the government in 2015. However, some of the critics have pointed out that targeting inflation by RBI has certain fundamental flaws which can hinder the economic growth and development. Further, some of the critics have also pointed out that RBI's excessive emphasis on targeting inflation has led to neglect of other important or crucial regulatory function, and this can be evident in the increasing number of bank fraud cases which have started taking place recently. Critics have also pointed out that by neglecting other important regulatory functions apart from controlling inflation, there can be an impact on financial stability of the economy. So, in this aspect, let us understand various aspects of inflation targeting, such as its rationale, problems, as well as challenges. Now, inflation targeting is a monetary policy framework where the central bank focuses only on maintaining rate of inflation in the economy, and this is done by keeping the inflation within a targeted range. The targeted range is mainly taken at 4% plus 2% as well as minus 2%. So basically the range covers from 2% to 6%. Now the question is why inflation is targeted by the central bank or controlled by the central bank. It is generally believed that increasing price in the economy creates uncertainties or unpredictabilities with respect to decision making, and this adversely affects savings and also encourages speculation in the market as there is an increase in speculative investments such as buying gold. So, in this aspect, it is believed that inflation targeting by the central bank brings in more predictability and transparency in deciding monetary policy. Now, inflation targeting was first adopted by New Zealand, and subsequently, a large number of countries, including India, have been following inflation targeting as their core element of monetary policy. As discussed above, in the case of India, inflation targeting was introduced through the Monetary Policy Framework Agreement signed between the RBI and the government in 2015. So, as per the terms of the agreement, the RBI's primary objective is to maintain price stability while keeping in mind the objective of growth. So, we can say that the primary duty of RBI as per the Monetary Policy Framework Agreement is to maintain price stability along with balancing growth in the economy. So, as per this agreement, the RBI is required to maintain a rate of inflation of 4% with a deviation of 2%. That is, the range of maintaining inflation then becomes from 2% to 6%. So, after understanding the concept of inflation targeting, first of all, let us go through a question asked in mains by UPSC in 2019. The question was, do you agree with the view that steady GDP growth and low inflation have left the Indian economy in good shape? Give reasons in support of your arguments. So, to understand this question comprehensively, let us go through the benefits of inflation targeting as well as the challenges and problems associated with inflation targeting. Now, one of the benefits of inflation targeting is enhanced transparency. As per this policy, it fixes the range of inflation in an economy which is to be achieved. Further, fixing the range of inflation also draws the attention of the central bank to take specific monetary steps to control inflation within the fixed range. So we can say that fixing such a range of inflation brings more clarity as well as predictability with respect to the rate of inflation as well as with respect to monetary policy formulation. Now, a higher rate of inflation leads to decrease in the purchasing power of the currency, and this also reduces the savings and investment rate in an economy. It also increases the unemployment levels, which further leads to overall decrease in the GDP growth rate. Further, higher rate of inflation also leads to higher levels of fiscal deficit and current account deficit, and this also impacts the macroeconomic stability of a country. Inflation targeting by the central bank helps in keeping the inflation low and at moderate level, and this brings more predictability to the macroeconomic policy of the RBI or the central bank. This also encourages the investors because they can see a stable economic environment within the country. So, effectively, the investors are more keen to invest in such an economy which is more predictable, and this further leads to higher growth and development of such an economy. Another benefit of inflation targeting is to maintain autonomy and accountability of the central bank or the RBI. Now, as per the Monetary Policy Framework Agreement, the RBI has been given complete autonomy in maintaining the rate of inflation within the mandated targets. So, if the RBI fails to maintain the inflation within the target, then it would be required to submit in writing the reasons for its failure. Thus, giving autonomy as well as accountability to the RBI enables the RBI to enjoy autonomy, and it also enables the government to have enhanced accountability over the actions of RBI. Now, another benefit is with respect to the empirical evidence which the researchers have so far. So, the inflation targeting has been quite successful in some of the advanced economies of the world, such as UK, New Zealand, etc. And these advanced economies have been able to maintain moderate rate of inflation for a much longer time, leading to increased macroeconomic stability in their area. So these can be said to be some of the benefits of targeting inflation by the central bank. So after understanding these, let us also go through the problems and challenges with respect to inflation targeting. Now these are some of the problems and challenges with respect to inflation targeting. First, it disregards the multifaceted role of RBI. As we had seen that RBI performs a very multi-dimensional role with respect to regulating money supply, influencing rate of interest, controlling rate of inflation, managing the external sector with respect to exchange rate, supervising and regulating the banking sector, as well as ensuring financial stability in an economy. Now, in a developing country like India, it is not practical or feasible for the RBI or the central bank to focus only on inflation targeting, as it needs to perform other important function which is necessary for the larger developmental perspective of the economy. Thus, we can say that the RBI needs to balance between growth, price stability, as well as financial stability. Now, price stability is always confused with financial stability, as financial stability has much broader aspect with respect to an economy, and price stability is only one of its components. So, in this regard, the RBI needs to focus on a comprehensive financial stability of the country rather than only focusing on the price stability with respect to inflation targeting or keeping an inflation within a targeted range. So it says that there is no clear link between price stability as well as financial stability. Now, this is because prior to the 2008 global financial crisis, advanced economies were able to maintain moderate rate of inflation for a longer period of time, and this was mainly due to adoption of inflation targeting. So it was considered that inflation targeting led to both price stability as well as financial stability. However, the global financial crisis of 2008 changed this perception with respect to price stability as well as financial stability. So, the 2008 crisis has clearly proved that price stability alone cannot lead to financial stability in the market, and excessive focus of the central banks on price stability may lead to neglect of other crucial functions, leading to an economic crisis. Now, with respect to price stability and financial stability, the former RBI Governor Subba Rao has highlighted that there is a trade off between the two concepts. That is, if the central bank focuses only on price stability, then it will imperil the cause of financial stability. So, we can effectively say that the central bank should not focus only on price stability rather than have its entire focus on the comprehensive financial stability, as it will also lead to an overall macroeconomic stability in the country. Now, with respect to empirical evidence against inflation targeting in India, the RBI has been able to maintain stable rate of inflation within the mandated range since the last 2 to 3 years. However, despite maintaining the targeted range of inflation, the Indian economy is still facing challenges on multiple fronts. For example, the GDP growth rate has been reduced to 25 quarter low of 5% for the first quarter of financial year 2019-20. Further, the unemployment has increased to a 45-year high of 6.1%. Further, there has been contraction in the manufacturing activity, as is evident in declining index of industrial production. And even the agriculture sector is staring at a huge agrarian distress. So, by going through all these examples, we can definitely say that despite the RBI maintaining the targeting inflation within a particular mandated range, there are still certain problems facing the Indian economy. So, this empirical evidence stands against India in the present circumstances of targeted inflation. Now, the next challenge is poor monetary policy transmission in India. Now, monetary policy transmission means when the central bank of a country either increases or decreases the rate of interest, then rates of deposits or borrowings from banks also increases or decreases accordingly. But this is generally not the case in India. So we see that monetary policy transmission is more efficient in advanced economies. That is, whenever their central bank either increases or decreases their rate of interest, then such increase or decrease is always reflected in the deposits or borrowings of these banks of such advanced economies. So this is what we mean when we say that in India we have poor monetary policy transmission. Now, this also becomes one of the problems with respect to inflation targeting. Now, to contain inflation in an economy, the central bank must reduces the money supply in the economy. And this is done by increasing the rate of interest. So, if the RBI is always focused on inflation targeting, then it is always in the tendency to increase the rate of interest, and this effectively leads to a contractionary monetary policy. So, when rate of interest is increased in banks, then the amount of loan taken from the banks decreases. And this further leads to decrease in investment as well as consumption expenditure in the economy, further leading to a decline in GDP growth rate. For example, during the 2013-2015 period, the higher interest rates in the country on account of higher rate of inflation had led to decrease in the GDP growth rates. So we can say that only on focusing inflation targeting, it also hinders GDP growth rate of the country. Now, inflation in India can also occur because of supply side constraints, such as increase in global crude oil prices, impact of poor monsoon, natural disasters such as floods, etc. Now, this can be seen in the recent increase in prices of tomato and onions, as it is mainly on account of supply side disruptions. So, under such circumstances, RBI would have limited role to play in easing the rate of inflation, especially when the inflation is from supply side constraints. So, with supply side constraints, it's rather the government of India which would be required to address these supply side constraints or disruptions in order to moderate the prices of such commodities. So, effectively, supply side constraints is mostly managed by the government of India. So, we can say that the inflation targeting by RBI can take into account only the demand side inflation and not the supply side inflation. Post 2008 global financial crisis, the dominant view which has emerged around the world is with respect to having a flexible inflation targeting rather than pure inflation targeting. As flexible inflation targeting has been considered more efficient for monetary policy formulation. Now, under flexible inflation targeting, the role of RBI would be to see whether the inflation is within the range of mandated 2% to 6%. If the rate of inflation is way off the range or way off the target, then the primary emphasis of the central bank or the RBI would be to bring the rate of inflation within an acceptable range. And if the rate of inflation is within the mandated range of 2 to 6%, then the RBI in such instances or the central bank of a country must focus on other important core regulatory function of the central bank. So it is being said now that the central banks around the world should focus more on flexible inflation targeting rather than pure inflation targeting. So in this aspect, there is a need for greater debate around the kind of inflation targeting which is being followed as a policy by RBI in India. Now, this topic of inflation targeting becomes important and questions can be asked in your prelims or mains examination. In the prelims, this topic gets covered under economic and social development, and in the mains, in GS paper 3, especially with respect to issues pertaining to Indian economy and inclusive growth. So, after going through the previous DNS video on inflation targeting, let us take up the question for the day. Now, after our discussion, this becomes your question for the day. The question is, Report on Currency and Finance 2020-21 has been published in India by. Options are A. Ministry of Finance, B. Ministry of Commerce and Industry, C. Reserve Bank of India, and D. Competition Commission of India. Now, coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, which of the following statements are correct about the new social media and OTT platform regulations? First, the content on OTT platform has to be classified as per 5 age-based categories. Yes, this is correct. Second, guidelines related to regulation of social media will be administered by Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. No, this is incorrect as it will be done by Ministry of Electronics and Information. So the question was select the correct answer using the code given below. The correct answer becomes A only. So with this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you.